did it because I thought it was right.
A major public investigation blasts Tony Blair for taking the UK to war in Iraq, but the former Prime Minister is not likely to face any legal consequences. Crowds gather outside the Minnesota governor's mansion in the US, plastering its gates with crime scene tape after a black man was shot dead by local police during a traffic stop. Documents reveal billions of gallons of toxic wastewater have been dumped into the Gulf of Mexico. That's as a result of offshore fracking, without any environmental checks by the US government. Welcome to RT International Live from Moscow, 5 p.m. in the Russian capital. I'm Daniel Hawkins. Great to have you with us this hour. Our former British Prime Minister Tony Blair was waking up on Thursday to see his face on the cover of almost every British newspaper. The media have come down pretty hard on Tony in the wake of a damning major report into the UK's role into the Iraq war. Now, here are some of today's front pages. Blair is being called a monster of delusion, while his case for war is being referred to as a weapon of mass deception. One newspaper even went as far as to say that the former Premier is, quote, spinning on the graves of those killed in the conflict. The results of the inquiry were delivered on Wednesday by Sir John Chilcot. The 7-year investigation found that war was not the last resort at the time. It also concluded that Blair exaggerated the threat of weapons of mass destruction and ignored warnings that an invasion would boost terrorism. The UK intervention contributed to the deaths of thousands of Iraqis as well as 179 British soldiers. The war was also cost almost £10 billion. However, the price paid by relatives of killed British troops is impossible to estimate.
I think about him so often. There's never a closure onto losing somebody. If he'd have died defending this country, I would have been not happier, but I would have been more satisfied. But to see him, his blood runs in the sands of Iraq, is an irrelevance. Obviously time heals, but it doesn't help when you see people walking into the sunset that have been the instigators of it.
We were proud when our husbands, sons and daughters signed up to serve our country, but we cannot be proud of the way our government has treated them.
Blair has a lot to answer for. He wasn't elected to falsify intelligence and then present that to Parliament. I just want some justice for these soldiers.
Bring Lee back, but you know, hopefully his name will be remembered for the change in the way soldiers are treated in the future, families are treated in the future, the way we go to war in the future, and he'll be remembered for that as well as the hero that he was.
There is one terrorist in this world that the world needs to be aware of, and his name is Tony Blair, the world's worst terrorist.
The consequences of the war have been devastating for Iraq, which has developed into a terrorist hotspot since the invasion. Here you can see the aftermath of one of the most deadly terror attacks in the country. It took place just last week. It was carried out by Islamic State and killed 250 people. After the results of the Iraq inquiry were announced, Tony Blair made a passionate defence. He apologised for mistakes he made in the planning of the war, but backed his decision to join the US on the battlefield.
The statement that I make will be, I did it because I thought it was right.
Well, despite the Chilcot report criticising Tony Blair, the inquiry is not likely to result in any kind of legal consequences for the former Premier, as RT's Murad Ghaziev reports.
Leaders can fall. Whoa. Kings can be torn apart. But only some.
The legal basis for military action was far from satisfactory.
What are you apologising for today?
For the mistakes.
Oh, well, that's all right then. You're off the hook for lying about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. As for the deaths of thousands and the birth of ISIS, Tony says he never saw it coming.
There are lots of difficult things in politics and lots of things that go wrong, but this is something that has gone right.
But hey, at least you're sorry, Tony. Carry on. And speaking of untouchables...
My biggest, regret is what happened in Benghazi.
Regret. An ambassador of the United States murdered in Benghazi under Clinton's watch.
Officials in Washington failed our men and women on the ground when they were in need of help.
The official report says it was her fault. But was it really her fault?
I think it's pretty clear it's time to move on.
Okay, let's. Now, what about those emails, Hillary? The classified ones, which affected the security of all Americans.
Nothing I sent or received was marked classified at the time.
They were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information.
Darn those investigators. That's twice now. But not to worry.
Our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
Good thing you're a Clinton, Hillary. Imagine not being a Clinton.
This is not to suggest that in similar circumstances, a person who engaged in this activity would face no consequences.
Transparency is a hell of a thing. Take Obama's drone wars. He was open, honest about illegally bombing Pakistan. No secrets. Of course, mistakes happen, like dead civilians.
What the national security team and the intelligence community is attempting to do is to break some old habits and bringing transparency to this element of our national security strategy and our counterterrorism strategy.
Or not. The rules of transparency, it seems, do not forbid drastically understating civilian casualties. After all, you're the most powerful man in the world.
It doesn't look good in this appearance of impropriety, of there being one set of justice and legal standards for one set of people, and there being another set of standards for the rest of us.
The rules are different for them, not what they are for you and me. Kill thousands, bomb continents, murder your enemies, and then apologize. Morad Gazdiev, RT.
Well, the Chilcot report has shed light on many things, one of them being the almost tender relationship between Tony Blair and George W. Bush. At least that's the impression many got after seeing letters exchanged between the two. We took to London streets to gauge people's reaction.
As part of the Chilcot report, for the very first time on Wednesday, private correspondence between Tony Blair and George W. Bush has been released. And it's not quite what you might expect. Some of it is diplomatic and businesslike, of course, but other parts are, well, almost tender, sweet. So we decided to have a bit of fun with it. I've come out onto the streets armed with two sets of excerpts from the letters, one real and one cleverly falsified by my newsroom colleagues. And it's time to see whether the people of London can tell the difference. There's nothing you could do that I would ever say no to.
Oh, that's got to be genuine. That's false.
False, false, false.
I will be with you, whatever.
What? No.
Whatever.
No. No. That's probably true. That's true.
Come on, George, you know wherever you go, we'll follow. Tony.
No. He would never spell it out as with names.
It was a brilliant speech. Well done. Yours ever, Tony.
That's very much Tony Blair.
That's a hard...
Depend on what he wanted from him at the time, really, wouldn't it? Context dependent, true.
False, false, false.
So there you have it. It's pretty hard to tell truth from fiction, particularly when the people you're looking at are leaders of the free world.
Well, the Chilcot reports understandably dominated proceedings in Parliament yesterday, with Prime Minister Cameron delivering a pretty lengthy speech, but for one politician it turned out into a social network nightmare. The Home Secretary Theresa May has been mocked online for apparently dozing off as David Cameron was giving his account of the Chilcot report. The 59-year-old is the front-runner to replace Mr Cameron in Downing Street in September.
That the advice given to the government by